Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your sources, dig in, and pull out what really matters. Today, we've got a headline that, well, it definitely makes you stop and think. Colombia, Trump, and the funding deal. This is from a New York Times piece published July 23rd, 2025. You see that kind of combination, and immediately, questions pop up. What's really going on?
It is quite the headline, isn't it? Really catches the eye.
Hmm.
You've got Columbia University, a major academic institution, obviously, then Donald Trump, a very prominent political figure,
Yeah.
and this phrase, funding deal.
Yeah,
It just makes you wonder, what could that possibly look like? What does that entail?
exactly.
So I think for this deep dive, our mission really is to unpack what the Times actually found out about this specific deal. And then maybe step back and think about the bigger picture, the kind of environment where a headline like this even exists.
Right. It's not just the shock value of the headline. It's about what the New York Times actually uncovered. So let's get into that. What did the article lay out? What was the core of this funding deal?
Well, according to the Times report, this wasn't like a simple donation.
Yeah.
Not straightforward at all. It was described more as a multifaceted public-private partnership.
Okay.
The article mentioned a pretty substantial investment. It came from a new foundation linked to Mr. Trump, and it was specifically earmarked for setting up a new center at Columbia.
A specific center.
Yes, a Center for Global Economic Leadership. And this was planned for their new Manhattanville campus. What also stood out in the article was the mention of naming rights.
Naming rights.
Yeah, provisions for naming rights for apparently a significant part of a new academic building tied to this center.
Okay, so it's definitely more complex than just cash. It's about, well, intellectual real estate, you could say,
Yeah.
research focus, and potentially influence, I suppose. Did the article get into the why, motivations for both Columbia and the Trump-linked foundation?
It did touch on that. For Columbia, the Times pointed to, well, a pretty significant need for capital,
Mm-hmm.
especially to push forward those ambitious expansion plans up in Manhattanville.
Right, that's a huge project.
Exactly. And also maybe a strategic goal to attract, high-profile research and establish a leading institute focused on global economics.
Makes sense from their side. And for Mr. Trump, or the foundation.
From that perspective, the article suggested it was perhaps a move to solidify a legacy. But in the realm of public policy and economic thought, extending influence beyond, say, a political career into the academic world.
Mm.
Of course, the article also noted that this kind of partnership, while it brings money, it also brings a lot of public attention and scrutiny.
I can imagine. That's quite the strategic play for both sides, really.
Yeah.
But, a deal involving a figure like Mr. Trump, who is, let's face it, a polarizing figure that must have kicked up some dust, right? Internally at Columbia or externally. What did the Times report about reactions or controversies?
Oh, absolutely. The article definitely highlighted that. It mentioned immediate discussions happening within Columbia, particularly among faculty and alumni, too. Concerns were raised about, well, the usual things in these cases, academic freedom, and the potential for political influence over what the center would research or even teach.
Right, the curriculum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Times actually quoted a few professors who voiced concerns about keeping the university nonpartisan, maintaining that intellectual independence.
Yeah, that's core to a university's identity.
And then externally, yes. Public statements from various watchdog groups, advocacy organizations, questioning the transparency around how the deal was negotiated,
Okay.
and also asking about the long-term impact on Columbia's public image.
So it really underscores that it's not just about the money, is it? Especially for a big university. It's about the affiliations, the message it sends, that whole soft power dimension and institutional autonomy you mentioned.
Precisely. And the Times article, maybe implicitly, connects this to the bigger landscape of university funding today.
How so?
Well, we are seeing more examples, aren't we, of major universities looking for funding beyond traditional sources. Often involves individuals or entities with, let's say, very distinct public profiles or even agendas.
Right, not just anonymous alumni donations.
Exactly. And this kind of funding, often called restricted funding,
Hmm.
where the money is tied to a specific project, like this center, not just general use, it's becoming more common, but it almost always brings that extra layer of scrutiny, that tension between donor influence and academic independence.
Yeah, and public perception too.
And public perception, definitely.
So this specific deal, as the Times laid it out, it really highlights that tightrope walk universities have to do. They need resources, vital resources for growth, for research, but they also have to protect their core values, their independence, their reputation for impartiality.
That's a great way to put it, a tightrope walk.
It sounds like this isn't just some isolated, weird event, but maybe a sign of how universities are navigating really complex financial situations now.
I think that's fair to say.
Mm.
It could be indicative of broader trends, these new kinds of partnerships being formed. It certainly challenges us, to look past the headline grab and think about these deeper forces at the intersection of, well, academia, politics, and finance.
It really is a lot to think about. And that kind of brings us toward the end of this deep dive. We've explored the details and, frankly, the many questions sparked by that New York Times headline, Columbia, Trump, and the funding deal. We looked at what the article revealed about the partnership itself and the pretty complex reactions it stirred up.
Yeah, and if you zoom out to the bigger picture, a headline and a story like this really do spotlight just how complicated things can get. These sometimes unexpected connections between sectors you might think are separate: academia, politics, finance.
Mhm.
It really pushes you, the listener, to consider all the different shapes these funding deals can take and what their impact might be, sometimes in ways you don't immediately foresee, on everyone involved and, yeah, public perception too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And here's something to maybe turn over in your mind. When you hear about a funding deal between a major university and a prominent political figure, what are the very first questions that jump into your head? Is it about transparency? Is it about influence? Or maybe the future implications for the university, the figure, everyone? Lots to consider there. And of course, if you want the full narrative on this specific event, we definitely encourage you to look up that original New York Times article from July 23rd, 2025. Until next time.